related to accountability as outlined in the CRP, including those related to entities beyond the IRGC. So I'm happy to hand the floor over to them.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to human rights activists in Iran for organizing this session and inviting us to speak. Obviously, very, very timely after the issuance of our report 3 weeks ago now, and our CRP. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aida Martirez-Sajjad. I'm the coordinator of the fact-finding mission, and I'm joined by my colleague Anna Katulu, who is our legal advisor, and who will walk you through some of our findings. But before I hand over, I just wanted to maybe just say a few words about our mandate and the focus of our mandate and on what we've prioritized, especially in the second year. So as many of you know, we have this sort of two-pronged mandate. One is to investigate the allegations of human rights violations in the context of the 2022 nationwide protests. And the second part of our mandate is to preserve that evidence for legal proceedings. So we have interpreted this mandate, the second part of the mandate, as directly supporting accountability efforts in the future. So the first year of our mandate, we focused very much on investigating and sort of focusing on the crime-based evidence collection. The second year of our mandate focused more on trying to collect linkage evidence between the incidents and the violations and the crimes that we found in the first report, linking them to entities and persons of interest, including heads of entities. So that was very much reflected in the second report that was issued a couple of weeks ago. Maybe just one caveat as well is that while this is a human rights mandate, we have also looked at all of the situation from both an international human rights law perspective as well as an international criminal law perspective, opening up opportunities for accountability avenues in both areas. So with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Anna, who can walk you through some of the findings that we've made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aida. Thank you to colleagues for joining us today. So as Aida said, we've covered a number of entities, and I'll go through those. But also we took a thematic focus because, of course, in the first report, the mission covered various events and various incidents, but also broader patterns. And so for the investigational responsibility, we focused on the use of force, resulting in deaths or serious injuries, detention, the judicial system in as much as it relates to our mandate, and mandatory hijab enforcement. And within that, and within the human rights violations and crimes included in those 4 focus areas, we investigated the role structure of the IRGC, including the Basij, the police, the Raja, including its special units, and the Moral Security Police, as well as the Ministry of Intelligence, the Ministry of Interior, and the Judiciary, and a number of governors in some provinces. So the focus was both on the heads of those entities as well as the staff within those entities that were involved in commissions of human rights violations, serious human rights violations, or crimes under international. One of the things we considered was the knowledge of the crime, whether there were preventative and punitive measures, and those punitive measures or preventative measures include investigations, administrative punishments, or prosecution of their subordinates in case of commission of crimes or violations. And so, for those who are looking at motive liability, those would be the elements that are considered for severe responsibility, which we've considered to be kind of starting point. And then obviously we looked also at other modes of potential modes of liability, but that being started because that allowed us to look at the viewer within those entities. In terms of findings in those four areas that might be of interest with regards to the work on IRGC, but also with regards to other forces. On the use of force, the admissions findings focused on several incidents, which included the unlawful death in custody of Gina Massimini, as well as serious injuries, including blindings and deaths during protests in Tehran, Sakes, Imandare, Mohabbat, Balu, Mol, Sanandash, Bane, Jalanrud, and Thailand. What we observed is that the use of force in protests specifically usually involved several coordinated forces. And in that, it included the RGC, siege, Raja, as I said, including special units, as well as plainclothes agents of those forces. And while the mandatory hijab enforcement, if there was force in both moralities, these, and potentially probably. So in that context, in the context of use of force, when we examined the responsibility of the leadership of the state and the entities, we looked at several indicators to establish whether there was de facto authority. So we collected and considered official statements as evidence of knowledge and awareness of the crimes committed by subordinates. But also of evidence of failing to prevent and punish those crimes. Such statements included, but are not limited to, statements by the then Minister of Interior, by the head of the Raja Special Forces, and the governor of Kurdistan, for example. Other officials spoke about measures taken against the boat writers, revealing the fact that include statements by the commander in Greater Tehran. Again, related to the use of force, the mission that concluded that their officials had effective authority and control and the prerequisites of knowledge, but failed to prevent press crimes in their responsibility. On detention, equally, the Commission found that the Ministry of Intelligence Hierarchy, including the Ministry of Intelligence, their responsibility for crimes, their subordinates enforced 208, 209, 11. There is maybe one observation to be made that a lot of the victims that spoke about these official detention sites, especially in protests, where victims were subjected to torture, sexual violence, in what essentially lawless and unregulated space. And despite identified their exact location, they were still able to provide us with information that connected with agents that they encountered, including those agents,
IRGC to IRGC to other on the judicial system, the mission documented more than 10 cases for revolutionary courts related to the main focus and particularly examined the role of civilian judges in relation to a number of those in the last cases were considered to be illustrative, multi-instrumental role in profession. And this context of the judicial system is worth noting that the role of intelligence they so this includes intelligence, organization, and intelligence base. The roles that they played in the investigation and detention of defendants and enforcement. Focus and job cases were all elevated to national security cases, which then involved those entities. So the judges would rely on evidence reviews provided by entities, and that is those entities would all be present in the courtroom. And some occasions have been seen that witnesses speaking directly to the judges. Not in the area of, I'm very conscious of time, so maybe very few more points to cover. Just to check it. Okay. Yes, please. Okay. Of which Ms. Lead Leader focused on
Following UN practices and the mission's own terms of reference, the mission would consider requests for assistance in the context of credible accountability processes and may share evidence analysis subject to consent, confidentiality considerations, and security and risk assessment. With that, I'm handing back.
Okay, thank you for the input from the FFMI. We, I think we're very grateful to hear about all of the important work and information that you've accumulated over the past few years, and also the importance of bringing forward, victims of human rights abuses in Iran. I'm going to quickly hand it over to Natalia because she needs to leave soon. So just a very, very quick introduction. She's the legal officer at Redress, who specializes in universal jurisdiction, financial accountability, and repurposing of assets frozen under the Magnitsky sanctions. She has a much longer work background, but for now, because she has to leave soon, I'm going to hand it over to her.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you so much for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to be speaking to all of you. I was going to start by introducing myself, but you've kindly done this for me now. So I'll just say that for those of you who do not know Redress, we are an NGO based in London, The Hague, that pursues legal claims on behalf of survivors of torture, including those in Iran, to obtain justice and reparation for the violations of the human rights. As part of this work, Redress has represented individuals affected by arbitrary detention and state hostage-taking in Iran. This includes, for example, representing Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a British-Iranian citizen who was arbitrarily detained and tortured in Iran from 2016 to 2022. As part of our work on her case, we submitted 2 dossiers of evidence to sanction authorities across the UK, the US, the EU, Canada, and Australia, requesting Magnitsky-style sanctions on 20 Iranian officials involved in Iran's systematic practice of state hostage-taking. A final tranche targeting 10 more perpetrators will be submitted later this year. All of these submissions were based on testimony from victims of hostage-taking in Iran, as well as arbitrary detention, overall highlighting the grave human rights violations committed by the Iranian regime, such as arbitrary arrest, torture, and violations of due process. In this work, we have been very generously supported by HRVs, who provided crucial information on those behind the abuses, as well as the broader structures in Iran, including the IRGC's role in enabling the violations we were investigating. In addition, in November 2023, Redress, again with the support of human rights activists in Iran, published a case study on how Magnitsky-style sanctions can serve as a tool for accountability for human rights abuses in Iran. And in my presentation today, I'll be drawing on some of this work to set out what Magnitsky-style sanctions are, why they matter in the context of Iran, as well as provide some recommendations for strengthening their use in this context. Now, to begin with, a very short introduction. What are Magnitsky-style sanctions? For those of you who do not know, they are targeted measures that are imposed by countries like the US, UK, EU, Australia, and Canada on individuals and entities involved in serious human rights violations and corruption. These sanctions can be imposed on state actors as well as individuals and effectively freeze their assets, block access to financial markets, and restrict their international travel. Quite importantly, unlike broad-based countrywide or sector-wide sanctions, Magnitsky-style sanctions focus on specific perpetrators, not entire sectors, and thereby seek to reduce the harm they cause to civilian populations on a whole. With that in mind, I'm now going to proceed in the remainder of my presentation to outline 5 key advantages of Magnitsky-style sanctions and then turn to 4 areas of improvement. Now, to start with the advantages they offer as a tool for accountability, first, Magnitsky-style sanctions provide accountability by publicly naming perpetrators and damaging their international reputation. This serves both as punishment as well as a symbolic acknowledgement of victim suffering. Survivors in Iran that were interviewed by human rights activists in Iran have described the sanctions as a glimmer of hope, validating their experiences and showing international action. For example, a mother of a student that went missing after the 2022 protest that was interviewed by human rights activists in Iran shared, "Every time such a sanction is imposed, I feel like my child's disappearance isn't forgotten." In addition, survivors of hostage-taking in Iran that Redress has worked with have expressed strong support for targeted sanction, seeing them as one of the few tools for meaningful action available in the abuses that they have suffered. For them, Magnitsky-style sanctions targeting perpetrators help debunk Iran's claims that the victims were security agents, protecting them from victim blaming and the no smoke without fire narrative. Now, this leads me to the second advantage they may offer. By targeting the financial interests of perpetrators, Magnitsky-style sanctions undermine their ability to profit from human rights abuses, and so, in theory, disincentivize them from continuing their involvement in serious violations. Anecdotal evidence we collected suggests sanctions may have deterred Iranian authorities halting or reconsidering their role in abuses. For example, a former detainee released after the Iran's supreme leader ordered an amnesty in 2023 shared that the guards' behavior changed after sanctions were announced, even influencing prison conditions and helping secure better conditions for prisoners. Now, of course, other factors will have played a role in this situation, but this example does show the deterrent effect sanctions can potentially have. Thirdly, and briefly, Magnitsky-style sanctions can also target the financial entities that sustain oppressive regimes by designating foreign companies and state-owned enterprises. In doing so, they cut off the economic resources that enable human rights abuses and expose the true nature of these entities to the Iranian public, further weakening the regime's legitimacy.